Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Fraternity Foodie podcast. This is episode number 80. Incredible. We have with us today my good friend and mentor, David Westol. He is the founder, owner, and CEO of Limberlost Consulting. He showed me the ropes 8 years ago when I became a professional within the fraternity community. And I have to tell you, I am so grateful that he gave up his time, his energy to help me get acclimated, because I would not have survived or even be here today serving students if not for his guidance along the way. Dave is an alumnus of Michigan State University and the Detroit College of Law. He has an extensive and impressive background in fraternity and sorority life, and he specializes in risk and crisis prevention / management and interventions. He has served in many leadership roles at the executive level of fraternal organizations. We're certainly going to talk about that, as well as professional organizations. He has made more than 6,000 presentations regarding hazing, risk management, motivation, values, ideals, and leadership on over 510 campuses and at over 370 national men's and women's fraternity and sorority events and regional interfraternal conferences such as AFLV, NGLA, and SGLA. He has over 30 national fraternities and sororities as clients, and the services that he does for them includes onboarding and orientation for new officers, investigations and membership reviews, governance and governing document review, risk mitigation and management, as well as intervention procedures. Buckle up. This is going to be an incredible podcast interview. Welcome to the show, Dave Westol.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh man, it doesn't get any better than this. I have to tell you, I mean, I've been recording these podcast interviews for the last 2 years now, and I've been waiting for today saying, all right, when is this going to happen? When is this going to happen? And here you are, and I'm just blown away. So thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, so let's get into it. You decided on Michigan State for your undergrad experience, and you have a degree in journalism. So we know that you are very passionate about Michigan State today, but I'm wondering what made you choose the Spartans?
It was a product of actually two things: practicality, because I grew up in Lansing, not far from East Lansing. Everybody dogs me for saying, oh, real excitement, you went 11 miles to college. But Michigan State has an excellent journalism school, and I use that degree every day. Used it during law school, used it as an APA, assistant prosecutor, as CEO, and now as a consultant every day. So really glad that I did. And that was the attraction for me.
Got it. Now I understand why you like Hank Newer so much. It's that journalism thing that's pulling you guys together. Now, I seem to recall a pretty funny story about how you chose Theta Kai fraternity at Michigan State. So what made you choose Theta Kai?
My friends at Delta Chi continue to remind me of this. I was going out with a woman from Zeta Chi Alpha at Michigan State for about 4 weeks, and we were like peas and carrots, as they say in Forrest Gump. She moves into her chapter house, fall quarter starts, she vanishes. I don't see her, I can't talk with her. Finally have that discussion one night, and after I was at that point in life a working class hero as I envision myself, and I'm just criticizing fraternities and saying they suck and everybody, their parents buy their way through school. She finally convinces me to go through recruitment. I do. I asked her what fraternity she would consider joining, and she said, nah, 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 nah. And then she said, but the nicest guys, I thought she said, are Theta Kais. So I end up joining Theta Kai, and a year after I joined, I'm elected president of the Interfraternity Council, which shows you how profoundly weak that organization was. And I see Nancy there, and her name is Nancy McCauley. I said, hey, got you to thank for all this. And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, you're the one that guided me towards Theta Kai. She said, oh my God, Dave, I said Delta Chi. And they're too late to go back. I don't know who's probably feeling more unlucky, but that was the deal.
I love that story. And I mean, how things would have turned out differently if you were at Delta Chi. I mean, this is huge. Unbelievable. But I love that story and everything worked out. So there you
It did.
go. Now, you then went to law school at the Detroit College of Law, and you were a former prosecutor with significant jury trial experience. So, is that work that you did the foundation for your current day investigations, membership reviews, and risk mitigation with college fraternities and sororities?
It had a lot to do with it, Mike. I was an assistant prosecutor, one of 24, but I tried a lot of cases. More importantly, I worked with a lot of good investigators who, and if you read the police reports, you start to figure out how to get to where you're trying to go with an investigation. And that impacted not only that, but the way the law works. And as the saying goes, the wheels of justice grind slowly but finely, meaning you have to be patient. And that's one thing I've learned in doing investigations of chapters. You're not going to walk in there and take over the room. You go in there and start asking questions. You have conversations. That'll usually get you to where you want to go. But yeah, definitely an impact.
That makes a lot of sense to me. So for over 18 years, you served as the executive director of Theta Kai Fraternity. And I'm wondering, now that you're looking back on that experience and even some of the work that you're doing today, what's the legacy that you leave the Brothers of Theta Kai?
My hope is that I'll be remembered as someone who was always there for chapters and members, especially during difficult times. I went to a number of funerals. I made a lot of difficult phone calls. Some of them were just brutal, like telling the vice president of a colony at a significant university that because the president had been dealing drugs out of the colony house, we were going to have to close the colony. And as emotional as that was, I hope that he's able to look back some years later and say, you know what, Dave explained it in a way that I understood why the decision had to be made. Obviously, most of the members knew this guy was doing this and they had no reason other than to try. They didn't want to impact his career when he got out.
Yeah.
And it's those kinds of situations you look back on, not so much the good times, but the times where they really needed a hand on the shoulder. And I hope that will be my legacy.
Yeah, that's a wonderful way to look at it. I mean, there's no getting around that. When you're executive director, you have to make some really difficult decisions. And I can think back on quite a few really difficult decisions that I had to make. I didn't like doing it.
Yeah.
Certainly, there were some chapters that we had to close, and there was a reason why those chapters had to close. And I agree with you. I hope that those brothers can look back on that now and hopefully it was a learning experience for them. Hopefully they take those experiences and they're better brothers and better members today. But yeah, it's not always easy. You look at all the good times, and obviously I think the good times outnumber the bad times. But at the same point, I definitely feel bad for some of those chapters that had to close. What's nice is now I can look back at it and see that some of those chapters have come back, and they've
Yes.
come back stronger than ever before. So I know that in those cases, the alumni are extremely happy, and now I think they're much better off. But it's hard to see that in the moment. It's hard to see that when you're looking right at, an expulsion paper or that your chapter has lost its charter. So.
Yep.
I understand that completely. So now you run Limberlost Consulting, and I know so many people out there have absolutely no idea what is the Limberlost. So can you explain this to all of our listeners?
It was a title I grew up with in Michigan, but I didn't know the derivation until I actually started looking around for a name for my company. And I learned that there was an area from northeast, Indiana, stretching up to Bowling Green, Ohio, and then abutting the border with Michigan called the Great Black Swamp. This is early in the 1800s. It was nearly impassable. And the only time people would go in there was to harvest hickory and maple, oak, hardwood that would be used for ships and furniture. And there was a guy who made a practice of taking groups in, and his name was James Limber Jim Corbus. And one day, Limber goes in, never comes back. So when people came searching for him, the answer from the locals was Limber is lost. And that became the term. At least that's that's the one I happen to like. But it is, my concept is that I will help lead you through paths and through up and down hills, and then perhaps to a better place, ideally. So that was why I chose it.
I love it. It's kind of like a local Bermuda Triangle of sorts. You get in there and you don't come
It
out.
is. It is. When Michigan was a territory, Ohio was a state, they were disputing the Toledo Strip, which in today's we'd go, what? But who does that? Both the state and the territory mustered their militia, sent them into the Great Black Swamp to do battle. They couldn't fight because they couldn't find each other. And Bowling Green, Ohio still has a swamp festival every year that is dedicated to that area of the country.
Got it. Very good. All right, now we know. So you do a lot of facilitation work with headquarters staff, sometimes with volunteers, and you talk about 20 unorthodox ways to evaluate a chapter. So I'm wondering from, let's say a volunteer perspective or headquarters staff perspective, what are some of those ways that you evaluate a chapter?
I look at little things as opposed to big things. But for example, if they start telling me, the chapter will tell me, oh, we raised $20,000 last year for charity, I say, who did the fundraising? And where I'm probing is to see if it's actually the members themselves or if they have shoved this back at the newest pledge class and said, you guys have to raise the money while we stand back with our arms folded watching you do your work. Either way, if it is a joint effort, which you always hope in your heart it is, even the seniors, some of them will help out, and that is a good thing. If it's just the pledges, that's telling me there's probably a hazing mentality. But more importantly, it's not a chapter function anymore. It's you guys do the work, we'll pick up the credit. That tells me something about it. Behavior at events. You've been there as a CEO. The chapter that is distant, aloof, arrogant, fratty, they will show up late, leave early if possible. Their members always isolate themselves. They stay together. They never break up into groups. They don't want to talk about what a great chapter looks like because they've already decided we're the only cool guys here. That tells you, that speaks volumes to me. At meal events, they'll always sit near the back. They don't want to sit near the front where they have to listen to people. They want to sit near the back where they can carry on, use their phones, and generally send the message, we don't care about this. I look at pledge class unity. In some chapters, as you know, in your work, it's down to the point where I'll talk with a guy and say, we like the alpha betas, the title for the pledge class, but we don't like the alpha etas. I mean, they are so solidified into these subgroups. I say, how do you actually have a chapter if you've got 8, 9, 10 subgroups, all of which have their own identity, some of which actually have their own initiation? Tells you one way or the other. Zip code breakdown. I do that all the time with membership reviews now. Chapters will intentionally recruit men from certain high schools who, of course, come in. This has now become a country club. That's all it is. It's just a transfer from high school to college. And they think the same way, they look the same way, they act the same way. So that's not the diversity that we're looking for. Those are just a few of the 20.
I really like that. And you're absolutely right with the pledge classes. I see that all the time. I'm actually working with one fraternity, one sorority chapter, and kind of rebuilding their new member education process. And you can even see it within the new member education process, all of these cliques that are going on within these organizations. And it's either subdivided by pledge class. I've also seen the families is like still something that I see all the time. And sometimes it's even visible on social media. They're talking about the so-and-so family or, the so-and-so pledge class, and there's more identification with those subgroups. And I'm saying to myself, man, you aren't working together. I mean, we need everybody working together if you want to be the best organization on campus. But it's so hard to get out of those families or subgroups sometimes. And, sometimes it's just a matter of talking about that chapter unity versus the pledge class unity. And it's still so hard to get out.
Oh yeah. You see it all the time in your work, Mike. We got somebody does something that is absolutely wrong. You watch his or her pledge class come together and form behind them and support them, even though all the pledge members know what they did was wrong. Now we're talking maybe a junior So it's been 2 years since they joined, yet they will support them. It's why you and I see sometimes you ask, you scratch your head and go, how could this person have been elected president? Easy, if they've got the biggest pledge class in the chapter behind them. And they are voting not because this person is capable of doing the job, but because, oh, he's an Alpha Delta, so he's got to be cool. We got to support our bro, instead of thinking for the chapter. If I could remove one aspect from the fraternity sorority community, that would be it. And say, come on, let's start being a chapter again.
Right, 100%. I'm also interested in some of the work that you do for national boards of directors. I know you do some orientations, which I've seen to be very helpful, especially when you have somebody who maybe has never served on a national board of directors. So what types of things do you cover with these boards once they are elected?
I get them talking about what would an excellent board of directors look like. One of the primary challenges with a fraternity or sorority board of directors is that the newest members feel exactly what they are. They feel like rookies. Their first years, I don't want to say anything. I don't want to engage. And I try to flip that and say, you more than anyone else probably have the clearest eyes and the most open attitude. You haven't yet learned the culture of the board. You need to be the ones asking questions. And that's called a culture of inquiry. A good board, an excellent board, has a strong culture of inquiry, meaning everyone can ask questions. Everybody asks good questions, and you're not afraid to ask the proverbial dumb question. You don't even have to qualify. You just say, why are we doing this again? Or could you explain to me why? And take that from there. So I spend a lot of time on that. If you can get through that thicket on the Limberlost Trail, you've done something, because now they're going to keep asking questions. The second thing I talk about is the strategic plan. If you have one, where is it? A lot of good boards package it, it's color coded, it's in a nice notebook, and then it sits on the shelf. Why is that? Well, in fact, I made a practice out of jump starting strategic plans. And it's primarily because some of the leaders don't want to spend the time to invest in that. And to me, that's critical. That's your goal. Those are your directions. You don't like the strategic plan? Let's change it. But you should not abandon the concept of having a plan. That's going to drive a lot of the other things you do. And the third part is you can disagree without being disagreeable. You can challenge without being disrespectful, as long as you keep it at a higher level than what you might find in a typical group.
Yeah, this is like, I think one of the fundamental problems that we have within national fraternities and sororities is I'm seeing a lot of very young members get onto national boards. And then just to your point, that by the time they feel comfortable opening up and talking, it already might be a year or a year and a half into their term. And then what do? We basically kick them out, and then we bring in some new people in, and we have this cycle where we're replacing everybody on the board every 2 years. And it's like, I think that's one of the fundamental things that is broken within the fraternity and sorority system. It's so difficult to get traction when you're constantly replacing the board, and there's this big turnover every 2 years, because somebody as exec is suddenly reporting to somebody brand new, and they all want to put their stamp on the organization. So suddenly we're taking everything that we worked on for the last 2 years, throwing it out, and then we're replacing it with something new. It's just hard to get to where you want to go when we're constantly changing what the end game is.
Excellent point by you there too. I still use an exercise developed by Durwood Owen from Pi Kappa Phi, who just celebrated his 90th birthday.
Correct.
But he wrote up an outline called "Who Does What," and he's got three categories: it's CEO, the board, or a blend. And the categories include things like who's ribbon cutting ceremonies, setting the budget, as opposed to selecting staff members. The purpose of that, and it's not nearly as subtle as people might think of it when they read it the first time, is to say it is not the job of the board to run the fraternity. It's the job of the board to see that the fraternity is well run. So you hire the executive, and then you stand back and shut up and let the exec do his or her work. Yes, you have annual reviews, you do other things, but you don't meddle or micromanage, as it's called, with the day-to-day operations of the staff, which is precisely where some of these new national officers want to get involved. They want to, I'm going to go and visit this chapter. I'm going to do this and that. And you're saying, nope, depending on how you're set up. But your job is to have strategic vision, set the broad goals, and then supply the executive with whatever she or he needs to do the work.
Yeah, I'm seeing that so often where you have national board members that are inserting themselves into the day-to-day operations of the organization, including visiting chapters and working with them. And it gets so confusing in terms of who's doing what. I think that's why we are where we are, right? Is because you don't have that CEO making those decisions. You have 7 board members that are inserting themselves into the day-to-day operations. And then in terms of accountability, when things go wrong, I don't know who to turn to anymore, right?
And the undergraduates will typically go the path of least resistance. So if the exec comes in and says one thing, and the national officer comes in and takes a much lower stance, if you will,
Right.
They're going to go with a lower stance every time
100%.
because it's easier.
Yeah, we have some issues here that I think need to be looked at very closely. All right, so you do many membership reviews when there are problems within a chapter. So problems could be something like drug use, for example, in the chapter. It could be a hazing culture in the chapter. So I'm wondering, how do you encourage candor and honesty when the chapter knows that they have some deep-rooted problems and they probably don't want to admit that to you because then they might lose their membership in the organization?
You have 3 premises you go in on. I've done about 145 membership reviews now. I've been involved either directly or indirectly. And most of those have come now as a consultant. I have my own team of women and men that I call on, about 15 total, and I can draw on them. The premise number 1 is you're always going to find members who refuse to acknowledge that there are issues. And those are within 10 minutes, you can usually pick them up. Number 2, you will always have members who want to be honest if you give them the opportunity. And number 3, you will always find members who are uncomfortable or unhappy with the status quo and they want to see changes made. So your job going in, and to answer your question, is you don't go in for an interview so much as it is a conversation. And I make every effort when I do these, as do the members I call upon to help me. We never start an interview the same way. You always encourage candor. You tell them no one is going to attribute what you say to anyone else. And as information comes out, and it always does, my standard is you're going to find out 25% more about a chapter than you thought you knew, no matter how well you know that chapter. You're going to find about the person dealing Adderall. You're going to find out about the guy who's a predator in terms of sexual assault, whatever it might be. Those things are going to surface. What you need to do, though, is A, protect your source, and B, encourage candor with the understanding that no one's perfect. No one's if we didn't care about the chapter, we wouldn't be trying this. We'd just say, close it down and wait 4 years. What we're doing now is trying to rebuild or repurpose the chapter. Are you willing to help us? And in so doing, we need to see that you're going to be honest. So the ones who are will erp up, my ungracious term, a lot of information. But it really comes down to conversation as opposed to, this isn't cross-examination. This is, hey, tell me what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really grateful for that process of membership reviews. And I don't know of anybody who has as much experience in doing them as you have. And I can think of numerous situations and numerous membership reviews that I've been on, and they're always difficult when you're making those choices of who stays within the chapter and who has to leave. But ultimately, I can look back on it and say, wow, we have a really successful chapter today. And so that, for me, is very gratifying, knowing that we were able to essentially save the chapter. Is it possible that we cut too much? It's possible. It's always possible. But ultimately, I look at it as long-term success. And those chapters that I was working with, I know today they're incredibly successful. So something worked. And so I'm grateful for that. But again, it's just always hard when you're in the battle and you're making those decisions, because you know how tough that can be on the chapter. And you never are quite 100% sure that you made all the right decisions, but you hope that you made 90% of the right decisions. And then this chapter is better off in the long term.
I think that's a fair assessment, Barry.
So, all right, so that's good. So, you have a ton of accolades out there. I don't know of anybody who has the resume that you do. You've served as president of FEA, which is the Fraternity Executives Association, from 2002 to 2003. You've served or continues to serve on boards of directors for FIPG, which is the Fraternal Information and Programming Group, hazingprevention.org, charter member there, Gamma Sigma Alpha, the North American Interfraternal Foundation, and the Association of Fraternal Leadership and Values, AFLV. You were honored with the gold medal from the North American Interfraternity Conference for service to the interfraternal community in April of 2012. And you also received the silver medal from the same conference in 1995. This is extensive. The work that you've done is absolutely incredible within the fraternity and sorority community. So, I know we talked about Theta Kai, but I'm just wondering, what is your thought about the legacy that you're leaving to all fraternities and sororities?
That's a tough question, Mike. You're never sure how other people perceive it. I hope that people reflect. First of all, many of these things started with Theta Kai and a guy named Howard Alter, who was our executive director from 68 to 84. And Howard was very interfraternal, and he vested me with a sense of that you need to give back to the greater community. Mm-hmm. And he wouldn't acknowledge it, but he was usually proud of me when I went out and did presentations, and he'd receive compliments on that from other people. The other thing I learned from doing all those things was it's not me that counts. I only served as president of FEA. I had the opportunity to serve as president of a couple of the other organizations you mentioned, turned it down. I'm happier doing another job because I felt there were better people than me to step up. So my legacy is characterized with unselfishness. And it sounds odd for me to say that, but I would hope that's part of it, that you can have a big impact on an organization. You don't have to be holding the gavel.
I really appreciate that. You've had significant impact, no matter what position you've held. I know that you've had tremendous impact, and I'm grateful for it. So I just want to say thank you on behalf of all the organizations out there, because the work is tremendous. It's absolutely tremendous. And I also want to talk about something that I know that you really love. Some people might not know that you have officiated high school football in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Indiana, and you now started your 35th season as a football official in July of 2020, and now your 15th season as a referee. You've also worked as an official at the Division II and Division III college levels. So I'm wondering, what is so special about your role as a football official or referee?
It's just fun. I don't know how else to put it. There are so many carryovers to my work as a consultant, and indeed prior to that as a CEO and with boards of directors. I use officiating all the time. You don't officiate with good friends. You officiate with people of whom you trust and respect their opinions. But there comes a time in every game when you got to look somebody in the eye and go, what did you see? Here's what I saw. One of you is going to be wrong, and you have to be able to accept that and move on. I use that as a metaphor for a simile for good boards that are willing to be candid with each other. But the other part is I look around at the faces of the other four officials I work with, and I think I may not see them 2 or 3 times during the off season, but during the season, I may see them 2 to 3 times a week. And you form a bond of trust and respect, pretty hard to find in any other endeavor in our world today. It's one of the few times you can get together. And that doesn't mean just men, because we're recruiting more women to be officials, and I hope there are more out there who express interest. But the idea for the concept is it's fun to go out, do your very best. You're not going to get it perfect, but you try. And at the end of the game, you know better than anyone else whether you've done a good job or not for the kids, the coaches, and the fans. So there's a good sense of gratification there.
That's tremendous. I love it. So now I definitely understand that. So what is your favorite place to go out to eat as you're hanging out in Carmel, Indiana? And if you say Subway right now, I'm going to be very disappointed. I'm going to have to stand up and leave the interview.
I like Slapfish in Noblesville, and also the Deer Creek pub. Both places I go to on occasion, and good variety of food. But I just enjoy the cuisine, if you will.
I love it. I'm going to have to check that out next time I'm in Carmel. That is fantastic. Now, I am sure that everybody listening here is now very interested to speak to you. They want to ask you questions. They want to bring you in for speaking opportunities to their campus. Maybe it's facilitation work, investigations, membership reviews. There's all kinds of opportunities that are open here now. So what is the best place that somebody should go in order to contact you?
There are two. Well, one is my Limberlost Consulting. My website has, in fact, a contact outline, so you can just use that, punch it in, it'll get to me. Quicker than that would be david.westol, Westol, @gmail.com. That's my go-to. And if you email me, you will get a response usually within a couple of hours.
That's
And
fantastic.
those are easy ones. And or you can call me at 317-250-3799. Either way, I will be there and interested to hear what your situation is and what I can do to help.
Dave, you are a gem. Thank you so much on behalf of all fraternities and sororities. I have to say that. Thank you on a personal level, because again, I mean, without your guidance in some very difficult times, I mean, these last 8 years have not always been easy. I would say that there's a lot more good times than bad times, but certainly it's difficult. I think, you know, being executive director, unless you've been there and sat in that seat, you have to make some difficult decisions. And I think having somebody that you can call, having somebody that you call as a mentor that you can basically say, I don't know what the right decision is. What do you think? It's just very helpful. And there's so few people out there that have sat in that seat. And the fact that you've done it for so long, for 18 years, I mean, that's just gold for rookies like me. So I appreciate you being there. And I wanted to say thank you, because you mean a great deal to me. And I want you to know that you're very important to me.
You are more than welcome. And I remember those days. Yeah, I'm sure you'd agree. Being CEO of a men's or women's national organization is just about the loneliest job out there. There's no one else to confide in and who truly understands. So that's why the Fraternity Executive Association is comparably tight knit, because you can dial up other people and say, hey, I'm having this going on, or what do you think about that? And they'll give you the skinny, and they'll tell you exactly what you need to hear.
Yeah, thank God for FEA. And that's something I think that is an important lesson to everybody who's listening here, is that, you know, sometimes I see fraternities and sororities on a local campus level, they might be fighting or getting into some kind of disagreement. And then you and I are sitting here looking at it from our perspective, and we're saying, what are you doing? I mean, the executives of these organizations, we are all getting together at least 2 or 3 times a year to try and figure out how we can help each other, that we recognize that we have complementary skills. And if we all work together, then we can move this forward. And so behind the scenes, I have to tell you, all the fraternities and sororities are working together, and thank God for that, because a lot of times there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. A lot of other organizations have figured out things that we can help each other. And ultimately, I really do believe that if we all help each other, it's that rising boats mentality. We're all going to be better off if we help each other.
Always. I used to tell undergrads, they'd say, can we come to the FEA meetings? I'd say no. Why not? Because we can't afford all the medical technicians, the emergency workers, and the ambulances, all the transports. What do you mean? When you see all the executives sitting down, talking with each other, sharing absolutely candid opinions about one thing and another, you'll have a heart attack. You'll have the big one right there, even at the age of 20. And I said, we can't afford that. So
it's the God's honest truth, though. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for spending time with us today. Thank you so much to our listeners. Hopefully you loved this conversation. It gave you a window into something new today. Please be sure that you like it, share it with others, and we appreciate you being here. Hopefully we'll see you on another episode of Fraternity Foodie. Bye for now.
Thanks, Mike.